Good morning, I'm back again. I'll keep this back in the park this morning. A fuch is the Israeli version of a latte. And I'm in my park, and I was just wondering what to talk about, but then I thought, I just read Bret Stephens' latest in the New York Times, because he's obviously in Israel right now, and he was visiting the Israeli border between Lebanon and Israel, and also a bit of Syria up there. And I had done a video on our fence in the disputed territories and the difference between a fence and a wall. Now, obviously, we don't have a wall up in against Lebanon, because there's really no urban areas directly on the border. And it was the difference between the fence and the wall was space. The fence that we have, the ultra high tech with sensors everywhere and rooms full of, as Bret Stephens points out, women, because it's in fact almost all women monitoring the sense, because the IDF has noticed gender differences, and the gender difference is that women concentrate longer on screens. Who knew? And so the IDF is unwoke enough to realize that they must discriminate and use women to monitor the cameras. Anyway, so what we have up with Lebanon is not a wall. We have a fence, a monitored fence, same as the occupied, disputed territory fence. Only when there's urban areas and we need the space do we put up a big wall. And amazing how people do this to me every time. And then in Bret Stephens' article as well, because basically he's trying to rubbish the idea, Trump's idea of a physical wall. In the end, what Trump's looking for is border security. Nobody should be able to cross America's southern border illegally without going through a crossing point and be verified. That's the point. Now, Trump made it a wall. It was a great visual persuasion trick. It worked beautifully. He won the presidency based on the wall. If it now turns into a wall for only a small amount of space, especially in tight urban areas, if there are any that span the Mexico-America border, who cares? And you know, the kind of fence that we have in Israel, both in the disputed territories and on our borders with Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt in the south, those fences work perfectly. But somebody pointed out to me a huge caveat here. Those fences have to be actively maintained. You need to devote the time, the money, the personnel to monitoring all of the systems, the electronic systems. You have to have 24-hour, 365 army backup to drive fast to the fence, to fly drones fast to the fence, to back up the fence. Because unlike a wall, you can get through the fence, okay? You can get through it if you devote enough firepower. And so we have to have the systems in place to back that up. In a situation like the Americans have, with you know, a political change and a new regime that comes in, could just stop the funding for that, and suddenly your high-tech security fence, if you defunded all of the agencies around it that react to intrusions on your fence, wouldn't work so well. So I can definitely see the reasoning why you would need a wall. A wall would be certainly, to a certain degree, a bit more future-proof. It's not going to stand forever, but it might well help out when you go through changes of regime. And if, for example, the Americans went nuts and voted in an AOC-style Democrat with an open borders policy, the fence would just fall into disrepair and disuse, and it would become as if it wasn't there. A wall would be harder to reverse. That's part of it. And you know, Bret Stephens used to be a good writer on this kind of stuff. I don't know. Now he's just a sort of a boring never Trumper with this stuff. And one of the examples he gives in his little article is that, last year or sometime recently, the high-tech fence we have and the women monitoring it noticed some 7 ISIS guys heading towards the fence from Syrian territory. And before they could even reach our fence, they were obliterated by an airstrike. Can you imagine what would happen if Donald Trump was routinely calling in airstrikes against Mexicans approaching the fence from the Mexican side? Really? That would be fun to watch. And I mean, Bret Stephens holds this up as an example of how successful fences can be. Yeah, when you're in an active war situation and somebody is approaching your fence and you're pretty sure they're combatants, yes, you can call in an airstrike and blow them to their virgins. But I don't think that the Mexican-US border, even though they are in a war and they should consider it a war, and certainly the fentanyl pouring across and the drugs and the heroin and so forth is killing more people than Vietnam. But I don't think calling in hellfire missile strikes on people approaching the fence is going to play well on TV in America anytime soon. Right here, nobody cares. But all in all, anybody who's watched me for a long time, by the way, I'm Brian of London. Did I do my channel ident? I don't think. I'm Brian of London. I'm here in the forest in Tel Aviv. Yes, we have a small residual forest in Tel Aviv. It's called Bereshit Forest, which are the first words of the Bible, in the beginning, first words of Genesis, really. And most Fridays I do a little periscope from here, which will go up on YouTube later. I'm an ex-Brit, moved to Israel, and I now have lived here for almost 10 years. I'm still, switching topics, I'm still experimenting with the whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency world. It's very interesting. It's close to being really usable. And I think that the Patreon thing, which I've followed closely, which is the deplatforming of Sargon of Akkad, and before him, people like Robert Spencer and Milo, and basically the entire far left methodology now of trying to withdraw any chance for people who have non-cultural Marxist views to make a living. I think we're at a point where we're close to a tipping point where cryptocurrencies will be a useful part in fighting back against that. I mean, Bitcoin had a bit of a drop yesterday, but again, I haven't been using Bitcoin to store value in. I've been putting a little bit aside, but I've twice now moved money from the UK to Israel via Bitcoin. So bought Bitcoin in the UK at a place called Coinbase, sent it to Israel. That takes 20 minutes or so. It arrives at an exchange in Israel, and I immediately sell it for shekels, which can then go straight into my Israeli bank account. All the fees included, and the buying and selling, it's basically the same cost as using the bank, maybe sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. It's the cost of a cup of coffee difference, basically. You could win, you could lose. If the price of Bitcoin shot up in the 20 minutes, you could win a bit. If it shot down, but it's not moving fast enough to cause extreme differences. But it's working. But then the idea that you could then support people with a $20, $30, $40 donation every month, it's eminently doable. Bitbacker.io is a kind of Patreon for cryptocurrencies. I'm on there. A couple of people have sent me some crypto, which is kind of fun. You just sort of log on and see on your wallet that money has arrived. It's very satisfying, and it works. So hopefully we'll beat these things back. We have to take Western civilization back from the cultural Marxists. There's no other way. Otherwise, we will descend into a complete funk and get taken over by Islam. That's probably the future unless we fight back. I'm proud to say I live in Israel, which is, I think, the symbol of fighting back, the symbol of restoring one's national sovereignty and dignity from a land that was conquered by Islam. And Europe, instead of bashing Israel down, should be looking at Israel as the example of the future that they'll have to, once they're conquered by Islam, they'll have to get their countries back the way we did in Israel. Or they could just start fighting now and not allow themselves to be conquered in the first place. Anyway, that's me. I've done 10 minutes. I did a short Periscope earlier on 5G, which was very techy. I'll probably put both of these out on YouTube later today. So if you want to support me. Oh, and I'm going to be doing a new website soon. I've got the domain brianoflondon.me. There's absolutely nothing there but one page. But I think I need my own home on the web. And it's going to be brianoflondon.me. So, that's been fun. Any questions? Yay! Nice to see a few people watching. And see you all the next time. Have a great weekend and have a great week. Shabbat shalom to all. Bye for now.